straight from the comic book.
Get Spawn.
It's Spawn.
It's very rare for a new toy company to start up and change the landscape of toys. But Todd McFarlane did that in the early 90s. Let's take a look at Todd Toys, better known today as McFarlane Toys. Welcome back to the Junk Room, everybody. It's me, the Junkman, and I'm coming back at you with a whole new video, and I won't waste your time. Go to patreon.com, support the channel, get some exclusive content, hang out with the Junkman and more, or go to thatjunkman.com and buy a cool t-shirt like this one. Now, let's not... The action figures started up in the 60s, and in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, most of those action figures were always aimed for kids. Sure, you had some adult collectors that bought them, but overall they were made, designed, and bought by kids. But in the 90s, that all changed. The action figure collectors market was in high gear. Seemed a lot of these kids that grew up with action figures in the 70s and 80s were buying toys again as a young adult. Not only was the Kenner Star Wars figures hot again on the secondary market, you had new toys hitting toy stores like the Batman the Animated Series, Toy Biz's the X-Men figures, and more getting bought up by not just kids, but adult collectors. The kids that grew up on the comic books, science fiction movies, and cartoons of the 80s were starting to lose some of that childhood magic when the 90s started. Thanks to big movies like the 1986 Batman, the rise of more mature, darker comic books, and the superhero action figure lines were appealing to the young adults. And there was one comic book artist that knew this. Todd McFarlane was the creator of Spawn. The Spawn comic books were a huge hit, and something was unusual about it. This was a great seller from an independent comic book label called Image, and we saw the rise of more independent labels in the comic book industry. But McFarlane was set on changing more than the comic book industry. He wanted to bring characters from the Spawn comic book into the toy aisles. So in 1993, he met with Mattel Toys about launching a toy line based on the Spawn comic. But McFarlane and Mattel couldn't agree on the Spawn figures. McFarlane really wanted to focus on the details, make these aim more for a collector's market, but Mattel didn't agree. They wanted to do figures more like the X-Men figures from Toy Biz that would appeal to the kids and maybe pick up some collectors along the way. The toy industry didn't really see the collector's market as something big enough to cater to. Unable to reach an agreement, McFarlane decided, hey, I'll just make the toys myself. And he started up Todd Toys. Being that this was his own company, he could make the figures that he wanted to make and aim them to the market he wanted to sell them to, the collector's market. These were not the kid-friendly action figures that toy stores were used to. McFarlane knew his audience. These young adults that were buying up comic books just because they had a different cover, he knew that it could apply for action figures. Although variant action figures wasn't anything new to the market, McFarlane capitalized on this. Changing the colors of some figures, having some figures with or without masks, that started collectors rushing to toy stores trying to find every version of the figure they could. Spawn with a mask, Spawn without a mask, Spawn without a mask but the face is different. Clown with the alien face, Clown with the clown face. It was clear that McFarlane was tapping into a buyer community that the other big toy companies had overlooked. Sure, they had collector series or exclusives here and there, but they never went out of their way to grab the collectors the way McFarlane did. That was until his Spawn Todd toy line, when the other toy companies started to catch on that they could sell not just to the kids, but to the collectors. However, he had one more problem with Mattel. Mattel sent Todd Toys a cease and desist letter. They were not happy with him using the name Todd Toys, fearing that customers might confuse this toy line or the Todd Toy Company with Barbie's brother Todd. I didn't even know Barbie had a brother. This really made no sense, but instead of fighting one of the biggest toy industries, McFarlane just changed the name from Todd Toys to McFarlane Toys. Since then, McFarlane Toys has become a staple in the collector's market of action figures. And ever since the release of the Spawn figures in 1994, McFarlane Toys is one of the most successful toy companies for action figures and became the go-to action figure line for collectors. Since the release of Spawn, McFarlane released other lines not just related to comic books, such as television action figures, The Simpsons action figures, Star Trek action figures, video game action figures, and a dozen more. Now, let's look at that first line, 1994's Spawn action figure line. First, let's look at the original Spawn action figure. As you can see here, it has impressive detail, especially for an action figure released in 1994. There were 3 different versions of this Spawn alone. You have Spawn with his mask on, another Spawn that collectors named Hamburger Head that had him without the mask, and yet another Spawn without the head that collectors named Wormhead. The other Spawn in the series was Medieval Spawn, who not only had a 360-degree head swivel, also had elbow joints, single jointed knees, came with a sword, spinning shield, and removable cape. One figure that really showed that this was different than anything we ever seen in the toy aisle before was Clown, and there were 2 different ones of this one released. There was Clown with the clown makeup on, and another one that sent collectors digging through the toy shelves, Clown with an alien head. Probably the most fun figure in the line was Overkill, and again, there were 2 different ones to look for. One with blue paint and another one with a darker green paint. Probably one of the ugliest action figures I've ever seen, who reminded me a lot of a teacher I had back in high school. And wouldn't you guess it, there was 2 variations of this one also, one in white and another one released in black. And to finish up the action figures from the set, there was Trimmer action figure, and again, 2 different ones were released. One was released in black and green, and another one, brown and black. As you can see, these were highly detailed action figures, and not at all aimed for little kids. He was really tapping into a whole new market. But McFarlane didn't stop with the action figures. He had accessories to go along with them. Let's take a look. The Ballad Raider had to have something to drive, and here he is with his monster rig. Probably the most terrifying action figure car we ever seen since Shark Car. Spawn had to get around, and he did in his Spawn Mobile. But you can't have a great toy line without a great playset. And here's the playset from the Spawn line, the Spawn Alley playset. It stood 18 inches high, had a breakaway brick wall, firing missiles, a garage door that would open and close. It also came with a rooftop that would topple its contents onto the enemies below. Not only did you get these action figures and playsets, you got something free with each one, a Spawn comic book. Now I was starting to get into action figure collecting around this time. I didn't even know much about the Spawn comic book. I heard people talk about it, but I never really read it until I saw these action figures at Toys R Us. The detail, the paint, the sculpture, everything that went into this action figure line, you could tell went in with love. Sure, some people complained that he was trying to milk the collectors by making so many different variations. But overall, we were happy to finally get a toy company aimed at making toys for us, not just for kids. And the success of the Spawn action figure line showed the toy companies that there was an untapped market, not just for kids. Well, that's a look at Todd Toys, who you know more as McFarlane Toys. Hope you enjoyed this video. As always, please subscribe to the channel, thumb up my video so I know you like my content, and we'll be back very soon. Now, let's not... I don't want to waste time now, look at me. Now, let's not waste any more time and jump right into the video.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.